Some men go to war and come back the same. Most don't. But there is a small group of men, tough men, battle-hardened men, men who had seen death up close, men who had held dying friends in their arms, who came back from one single afternoon completely different. Not because of a battle, not because of a bomb, because of what they found behind a gate. It was April 1945. The war was almost over. These men had survived the worst of it. They thought nothing could break them anymore. They were wrong. What they found that day in that German camp didn't just shock them. It didn't just horrify them. It reached inside their chests, pulled something out, and never put it back. This is not just a war story. This is the story of what happens to a human mind when it sees something it was never built to see. To understand what happened that day, you need to understand the mood first. April 1945 in Europe felt like the morning after a long, terrible storm. Germany was collapsing. Allied forces were moving fast, taking city after city, road after road. Everyone could feel it. The war was ending. For the soldiers who had been fighting since 1942, since 1941, this was the moment they had dreamed about every single night. They could finally breathe. Some were already writing letters home. Some were planning what they would eat first when they got back. Some were just walking with a small smile on their face, something they hadn't allowed themselves to feel in years. The killing was almost over. Or so they thought. Because nobody told them what was waiting at the end of that road. Nobody could have. Picture this, a long, straight road, dust rising from marching boots, the sound of men talking, laughing, joking around like men do when the weight finally starts to lift. These were Canadian soldiers, young men from places like Quebec, Ontario, and Alberta, farmers, mechanics, teachers, fathers, all turned into fighters by a war that asked too much of everyone. They had been through hell together. They had lost men they loved. They had slept in mud, eaten cold food, gone weeks without a shower. They had watched their closest friends die in front of them, and then kept marching anyway, because that's what you do. By April 1945, these men were not the same boys who had left home. War had changed them. It made them harder, quieter, more careful with their words. But on this day, this specific April day, they felt something rare.
They called him Henri.
Hope.
He was the
One
only
soldier,
one who still
a
believed this was an
19-year-old
adventure.
from Quebec named Henri, was singing, actually singing out loud on the road, like it was nothing. The other men laughed. Someone threw a rock at him. Henri just sang louder. That laugh, that singing, that small, warm moment of joy on a dusty road. Remember it, because it was the last time Henri ever truly laughed. At the front of the group walked Sergeant Frank Glover. Frank was not a complicated man. He didn't talk much. He didn't joke around like Henri. He didn't write long letters home like some of the others. Frank just did his job. And his job was to keep his men alive. He had been doing that job for 3 years. 3 years of battles. 3 years of making split-second decisions that meant life or death. 3 years of carrying a weight that no rank or medal could ever describe. Frank had seen a lot, maybe too much. But he had one thing that kept him standing, something simple, a deep, quiet belief that some things in this world mattered, that right and wrong were real, that a man's job, his real job, was to face the truth even when it was hard. That belief was what made Frank different from every other man in that group, because when they reached the gate that day, most men froze. Frank walked forward. He always walked forward. He pushed the gate open slowly. He stepped inside, and in the next 30 seconds, that belief was tested in a way no soldier, no training, no war could ever prepare a man for. The gate was not dramatic looking. It was just metal, old, rusted, hanging slightly off its hinges. There was a fence, wire, some buildings in the distance. Nothing screaming danger, nothing warning you to stop. Frank pushed it open. He walked in. Pause. Then he stopped. He did not scream. He did not reach for his weapon. He just stopped. His brain was trying to process what his eyes were seeing, but the two were not connecting. Because what he was seeing did not match anything stored in his memory. It did not match anything he had ever been taught. It did not match any version of reality he had ever known. His brain kept saying, "This cannot be real." His eyes kept saying, "It is." The other soldiers came in behind him, one by one. They all stopped. The road sounds, the boots, the talking, the laughing, disappeared completely. There was only silence, and in that silence, something broke in every single man who walked through that gate. Something that never fully healed. I won't describe everything they saw in graphic detail, because this story is not about shock. It's about truth. And the truth is this. The Canadian soldiers had walked into a Nazi concentration camp. No Allied soldier was ever truly prepared for what these camps looked like up close. The photographs don't capture it. The history books don't capture it. The documentaries don't capture it. The people who were still alive inside those gates were barely recognizable, not because of anything they had done, but because of what had been done to them. Deliberately, systematically, for years. The soldiers had fought in a war. They understood violence. They understood suffering on a battlefield. But this was not a battlefield. This was not a fight between two sides. This was something without a name. Something that human language had not yet built a word for, because human beings had never done this before on this scale. The soldiers stood there, hardened men, battle-tough men, men who had walked through gunfire without blinking. And one by one, they could not hold it together. Some vomited. Some fell to their knees. Some just stood completely still, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to breathe properly. The soldiers had fought in a war. They understood violence. They understood suffering on a battlefield. But this was not a battlefield. This was not a fight between two sides. This was something without a name. Something that human language had not yet built a word for, because human beings had never done this before on this scale. Frank Glover did not cry that day. Not right away. What happened to Frank was something different, something quieter, and in many ways, something far worse. Frank's mind went into a kind of lockdown. You have to understand how a soldier's mind works. Years of training builds walls inside your head. Walls that keep emotion out. Walls that keep you functional when everything around you is falling apart. Those walls are what let a soldier keep moving when his friend just died next to him. They are what keep a commander making decisions when he is terrified on the inside. Frank had the strongest walls of anyone in that group. But walls have limits, and what Frank saw that day went past every limit. His mind didn't break loudly. It broke quietly, the way a dam doesn't always crash. Sometimes it just starts leaking, small cracks, then more cracks, then the water comes through slowly, steadily, unstoppably. Frank walked through the camp in silence. He looked at everything. He did not look away. But something was happening behind his eyes, a slow, quiet unraveling, like a rope coming apart, thread by thread by thread. Later, much later, soldiers who were with Frank that day said that Frank never talked about what he saw inside that camp. Not once, not to anyone. But they also said that Frank was never the same after. He was still Frank. He still did his job. He still walked forward when others froze. But something was gone. The Frank who had marched down that road, who had smirked at the jokes, who had believed simply and completely that the world made sense. That Frank never came out of that gate.
Remember Henri, the singer? Henri Beaumont was 19 years old. He had joined the army because his older brother joined. He was the kind of person who filled a room, loud, warm, always moving. In the darkest moments of this long and terrible war, Henri's voice had been the thing that reminded the men they were still human.
We're going home.
When things got bad, Henri sang. When men cried, Henri made them laugh. When the fear got too heavy, Henri carried it lighter than anyone else. He walked through that gate, still humming quietly to himself. He came out without a sound. Not just that day, not just that week. Henri Beaumont never sang again.
I'm worried about him.
The men noticed after a while. At first, they thought it was just the shock, just the weight of the moment. Give him time, he'll come back to himself. He didn't. Henri went home to Quebec after the war. He lived a long life, had children, grandchildren, people who loved him. But everyone who knew him before and after, they all said the same thing. The music was gone. Something that used to live inside Henri, something bright and unbreakable and completely his own, walked into that camp and did not walk back out. Captain Eleanor Marsh was a military doctor. She had trained for years to stay calm in chaos. She had treated men with missing limbs on active battlefields. She had made life and death decisions in seconds with bombs going off around her. She had seen more blood and more suffering than most people see in an entire lifetime. Eleanor was steady. Eleanor was strong. Eleanor was, by every professional measure, prepared for the worst. She walked into that camp with her medical bag ready, and within minutes, the bag was useless. Not because there was nothing to do, there was everything to do. There were people inside who needed urgent help, but Eleanor's hands were shaking. The trained, steady, professional hands of Captain Eleanor Marsh were shaking. She knelt down beside a survivor. She looked at this person, and in that moment, all her training, all her professional distance, every wall she had carefully built over years of hard work, collapsed at once. She was not a doctor anymore. She was just a person, sitting with another person in the middle of something that should not exist, in the middle of something her entire education had never told her was possible. Eleanor later wrote in her journal about that day. She wrote a lot, pages and pages, but at the top, above everything else, she wrote just 4 words. 4 words that said what no amount of training had prepared her to say. I was not enough.
Not far from the gate, a woman was leaning against a wall. Her name was Miriam. How old was she? Hard to say. She looked old, but she may not have been. The camp does that to a person. It takes time and gives nothing back. When the Canadian soldiers came through that gate, Miriam watched them. She didn't run toward them. She didn't cry out with relief. She didn't fall to the ground. She just watched, quietly, with eyes that had seen so much that surprise was no longer possible. Frank saw her. He walked toward her. He didn't know what to say. Frank never knew what to say. But he walked toward her because that's what he did. He walked toward the thing that needed to be faced. He reached her. He stood in front of her. He looked at her. And Miriam, quietly, without anger, without tears, without any drama at all, asked him one question. Just 4 words. Why did you wait? Frank had no answer. There was no answer. That question followed Frank Glover for the rest of his life. He heard it every time a room went quiet. He heard it in the spaces between conversations. He heard it in his sleep, in that place just before waking, when the mind is honest and the walls are down. Why did you wait? Why did you wait? Why did you wait?
After the initial shock, the military machine kicked in. A report went up the chain of command, and the order that came back down was clean and simple. Secure the area, document what you can, move forward. That was it. Move forward. Frank received that order. He read it carefully, every word. He folded it. He put it in his pocket. And then he did something that could have ended his military career permanently.
Keep the pace up, gentlemen.
He ignored it. Not out of rage, not out of emotion, not out of any desire to be a hero, out of a very calm, very clear understanding of one simple truth. If no one else sees this, it will disappear. History has a habit of burying what it cannot explain, of smoothing over the things that make people too uncomfortable, of letting time do what denial starts. Frank had no intention of letting that happen. He knew, with a certainty that went deeper than rank, deeper than orders, deeper than the entire military system he had served for 3 years, that someone else had to see this. Not hear about it, not read about it. See it. Frank sent men into the nearby German towns. He told them to bring
Was wollen Sie
people
von uns?
back.
Ich weiß es nicht.
Civilians.
Sei leise.
German civilians. Ordinary people who lived their whole lives just a few miles from this camp. People who walked past the wire on roads. People who smelled the air and told themselves it was something else. People who said they didn't know. Some of them truly didn't know. Some of them did. Frank brought them to the gate. He stood beside it. And as each person walked through, he said just one thing. Keep your eyes open. Some of them tried to look away. Frank stopped them every time. Keep your eyes open. Not a suggestion, not a request, a fact, a requirement. The most important requirement he had ever issued in his entire career. This moment, this quiet, defiant, deeply human decision was the most important thing Frank Glover ever did in his life. More important than any battle he won. More important than any hill he took. More important than any order he ever followed. Because Frank understood something that no military training teaches. Winning a war is not enough. If the world does not see what was done, if people do not stand in front of it and refuse to look away, then the people who did it win in a different way. They win the story. They get to disappear into history without a face. Frank was not going to let that happen. He burned the order to move forward, and he made the world look. The war ended weeks later. The soldiers went home. Frank went back to Canada, took a quiet job, lived quietly, never spoke about what he saw in that camp, not to his family, not to anyone. Henry went back to Quebec, raised a family, worked hard, was a good man by all accounts, but he never sang. Eleanor went back to medicine, built a long, respected career, saved thousands of lives over the decades. Her colleagues called her brilliant and unshakable. She never talked about the war, not once, not ever. And Miriam survived. She was one of the ones who made it out. Though saying someone was lucky to survive a place like that feels like the wrong word entirely. After the war, Miriam had a son. She didn't tell him everything. Some things are too heavy to pass down whole. Some things have to be carried alone. But she told him enough. She told him about the soldiers who came through that gate one April morning. She told him about the quiet man at the front, the one who didn't look away, the one who burned an order and made civilians stand and witness history. And she told him one more thing. She said, "That man, he didn't save us because it was his job. He saved us because he chose to see us. When the whole world was looking away, he chose to see us." Her son grew up carrying that story like something sacred. He carried it for decades, until one day, an old man now, He walked into a museum and stopped.
The photograph was black and white. It showed a soldier standing outside a gate. He looked tired. His eyes were red. His uniform was dusty from the road. He was not doing anything heroic in the photo. He was not raising a flag. He was not charging forward. He was just standing there, looking at something the camera couldn't see. The old man stood in front of that photo for a long time. A museum guide came over, slowly, quietly. "Do you know who that is?" the old man asked. The guide shook his head. "We don't know his name. It was never recorded in any official report."
The B-17 Flying Fortress
The old
was
man
the backbone
nodded
of the daylight
slowly.
bombing campaign
He
in
kept
late
looking at the photo. Then he said, quietly, almost to himself, "I know who he is." The guide looked at him.
December
"My mother told me
1943.
about him.
I can
She
still
was
hear the
there,
engines.
inside that
I can
gate. She said he was the first one through. She said he burned an order so the world would have to look." A long pause, the kind of pause that fills a room. She said he never got a medal for it, never got his name in any record, never asked for anything in return. The old man reached out, almost touched the glass. "But I'm alive because of him. My children are alive because of him." That soldier's name was Frank Glover. He never received an official commendation for what he did that day. His name was never added to any list of heroes. The world moved on, as the world always does. But somewhere in a museum, in a black and white photograph, a tired man with red eyes is still standing outside a gate, still looking at something the camera couldn't see, still refusing to look away. The world forgot his name, but now you know it, and knowing it is the least we owe him.